I want to ask you a question. 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 Yes, that was Queen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to take a look at part 3 of our 3-part series on effective surveys. Today it's all about questioning. How do we get the best responses from survey respondents? What kind of questions do we need to ask? So make sure you get out your notes, you follow the STORM philosophy of note-taking, and sit back and enjoy. So what's on tap for today? Well, again, we will refresh and make sure we have a full, clear understanding of what exactly a survey is and the purpose of surveys. Next, we will identify 2 types of questions, closed versus open. And lastly, we are going to identify 6 questioning tips. So we all remember exactly what a survey is. Again, it's a set of carefully planned questions. So this presentation, this video, is very, very important because if a survey is all about questions, then we really need to ensure that we have the appropriate questions. Okay, we need to ask these questions to a specific target market to get the sample responses that we can project on the greater target population. And again, no matter what the purpose of the survey, results are only reliable and valid if the questions asked are prepared correctly and carefully. So once we've planned out exactly how we are going to create a survey, the next step is to actually create those questions. This is the critical part of any survey. Again, the survey is the questions, so we need to make sure we are asking the correct questions. They have to have great strategy behind these questions, and that we oftentimes need to write down many more questions than we're actually going to use, and therefore we can select the most appropriate ones. But more specifically, we need to make sure that we have both types of questions, closed and open-ended. So, what are either of these types of questions? Let's take a look. The first type of question is a closed-ended question. This is the most commonly used questions on survey. Why? Because it is the easiest to respond to for survey responses. Closed-ended questions give the respondent a set of potential answers. Oftentimes these answers also include the other option, so you give them 5 options, and if one of those options doesn't apply, they can always write in the other option. And again, these questions funnel the respondents to a set of provided responses. Yes or no, male or female, like or dislike, it goes on and on. These are very quick and simple to answer. They're easy to sort and analyze, and that's the main purpose of surveys, right? To gather this information, to analyze it, and to draw conclusions so we can take action. That's what we're constructing surveys for. Therefore, these questions are very, very important. So let's take a look at a few samples of closed-ended questions. For example, if this was a question on a survey, this would be considered a closed-ended question. My favorite brand of soda is Pepsi. Check the response that applies. Agree, uncertain, disagree. Or this one. Which brand names have you purchased in the last year? Dove, Jergens, Irish Spring, Lever 2000, Ivory, or other? Now the one thing that you see here is that it gives the other option. This is very important because sometimes, no matter how much consideration you take into account, you sometimes leave out other brands, right, other options that someone would look to answer. Therefore, the other option groups all of those together and they can select that one. Or lastly, rate our service using the following scale. Cleanliness, or clean. Poor equals 1. 2, 3, 4, 5 equals excellent. Or maybe friendly staff. Again, poor is 1 and 5 is excellent. This gives a range of responses between really not liking the service and really liking the service. This is very important. You need to give this range. It doesn't automatically go from poor to excellent. There are options in between. The other types of questions are what we call open-ended questions. Now these open-ended questions are those questions that don't have a set of previously determined responses. These open-ended questions allow the respondent to basically write whatever they like. In many cases, the researcher doesn't know what type of response they'll receive if they want to ask a question, and therefore they can't come up with these predetermined response choices. Open-ended questions are perfect in this case. The information received is often very rich and detailed because the respondent is able to answer in whatever way they feel. And you can really use this information to make informed judgments. The difficulty with this, however, is that you're going to get a wide variety of responses that is going to be very difficult to analyze. So here are some sample open-ended questions. Like this one. What is your opinion of Air Canada? It gives the respondent a wide variety of choices that they can answer. There's no predetermined choices, then they can answer exactly how they feel. Or this one. When I choose an airline, the most important consideration in my decision is... And again, they would then finish that sentence exactly how they feel. Or this one. It's a little bit longer. I flew Air Canada a few days ago. They gave me a cold sandwich to eat. They stirred the following thoughts and feelings in me. Now complete the story. So this gives a little bit of a scenario, gives some context, and the person could then run with that and answer exactly how they would feel. Okay, so now that we've identified the difference between closed versus open-ended questions, we now need to consider the following tips. Keep questions as short as possible. Make sure everyone who reads the question understands its meaning. Stick to one topic. Avoid using sentences that are too confusing or complex. Use common words to phrase your questions, and avoid loaded questions. We'll take a look at these each individually now. So the first tip is the idea that you want short questions. You want to keep these as short as possible. Remember, respondents don't want to waste too much time answering surveys. They have better things to do. So keep the questions short. Again, this will cut down on time as well as confusion. Don't ask, what is the type of retail store where you or a member of your family are most likely to have bought groceries in the last year. There's a few too many details added to this question. There's a few too many questions being asked within the question. Instead, ask, at what type of store do you usually buy groceries? A, large general merchandise stores, B, supermarket chain stores, and so on and so forth. It gives them options and it breaks down the question into exactly what you are asking. The second point or tip is the idea of making sure that people understand the meaning of the question. Make sure everyone who reads the question understands exactly what's being asked. Be clear. You don't want to be confusing. Don't ask, how much time do you and your spouse spend watching TV? The problem with this is, what if you don't have a spouse? What if you watch TV separately? Right? So there's some interesting points to this question and some multiple questions being asked here. So instead ask, how much time do you spend watching TV? How much time does your wife or partner spend watching TV? Break it down into two separate questions. It's much clearer. People can understand exactly what's being asked. Tip 3. Avoid vagueness. The question should point directly to the information that is needed. Now, many of you will look at this question, what is your favorite breakfast cereal, and see there's nothing wrong with it. And that might be true, but what if your objective is to find out the different types of breakfast cereals in terms of favorites of consumers? Then you need to ask the following question. Which of the following types of breakfast cereal are you likely to purchase for yourself? Because having a favorite breakfast cereal doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to buy it. Right? So, and some people have multiple favorites. So you're trying to pick the most favorite in some cases, and the question needs to be poignant like so. Tip 4. Avoid using sentences that are too confusingly complex. So long, complicated sentence, break them up. Keep it to simpler, shorter sentences. For example, don't ask, do you feel the candidate may have known what he was talking about but didn't express himself well in his speeches and position papers? It's a little bit too complex, too confusing. So instead, ask a couple questions. Like so, do you feel the candidate's speeches clearly express his position? And number 2, did his position papers clearly express his position? Breaks them up, makes it far simpler and easier to understand. Tip 5. Use common words. Dumb it down. I know that seems harsh, but it's true. You should try to write your survey as if you're writing to a grade 7 student. So don't use words such as, what are the most salient and determinant attributes in evaluation of a product? It's a little bit too complex of words. Use common words such as, what factors do you use to judge a product? Much simpler, much more understandable. And lastly, tip 6. Avoid loaded questions. Loaded questions are those questions that lead the respondent to a biased response. For example, don't ask, do you like the amazing features of this product? You're suggesting that the product has amazing features. That's a biased question. So instead ask, how would you rate each of the following features on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being dislike, 5 being like. You'd list each of those features, and the people could respond to each of those features without any bias. So that brings us to our end of this presentation. Questions. Should a survey only have closed-ended questions? If these are easier to examine, easier to ask, the respondent can answer specifics, should you only use those? And number 2, how do you ensure that you give the survey responses a chance to answer something that may not be listed by you on the survey? What tip, what technique do you have to use? All right, ladies and gentlemen, make sure your notes are in order. Make sure you have summarized this presentation, this video. Make sure you have added a discussion question that you can ask someone else. And that's it. That's all. That's everything. We will see you tomorrow.